Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's your boy Keith the Guy, and we got some fish to fry, and I got a new special edition for your boys and your gals. So today we got ourselves DJ Virtue, aka Barack Obama's son, because he's looking real clean right now. And I wanted to do something special, and this is what I would consider an executive shoot. I already went ahead and cleaned up all the distractions from the gum on the floor to the dirtiness of the window, so that way we can hop straight into color grading. And I'm just gonna stop rapping and get started with the editing. So I recently got myself a BenQ monitor, which is for content creators and people who kind of want to take their professional editing to the next level. And what this monitor does is it's color calibrated, so you know exactly what colors you're working with. And when I opened up Photoshop, I was wondering why my photos were looking more washed out. And the answer is very simple. I was color grading in an sRGB color space. Now, sRGB has a far smaller color gamut than something like Adobe RGB, Display P3, and ProPhoto, which we today are currently looking at through all our devices. So let me show you a little tip and trick to get more out of your photo. As you can see beneath, you're gonna see sRGB, IEC, a whole bunch of numbers, and that's not where we want to have our color space. So in order to change that, what I'm gonna need you to do is go up to edit. Now you're not gonna be able to see it here in this video because it's kind of cut out because this is a super big monitor. I need to squeeze it down to 1920 by 1080. But trust me when I tell you, you're gonna have it on your Photoshop. So go up to edit and then go to convert to profile. And then this is gonna pop up, convert to profile. Now, as you can see, we're at an sRGB and I wanna put it to display P3. Now we're gonna press OK. Now the next thing you're gonna do is press Command J. Now, as I mentioned before, I got rid of all the distractions, so I'm not going to be doing any cleaning up here. I'm going to get straight to color grading. So I already know for a fact I want to get into camera raw and start twiddling with the exposures, the saturations, and things of that nature. So we're going to go to filter and we're going to go to camera raw. Now I got to bring it in here so you guys could see, because like I said, I'm using a whole new monitor. So I kind of gotta squeeze things in here. That way it could be in a 1920 by 1080, size. So we have our photo here, and you know what? Before I get into camera raw, let me show you guys a little trick, because I also cropped this photo as well. So I'm gonna press cancel, and if you want to crop and you're tired of looking at your rule of thirds, and you're wondering, how did I get this nice golden spiral? Just go up here and then you're gonna have a whole bunch of options. Just wanted to show you guys that real quick. Now I already know based off of face value alone, this photo is a little underexposed for me. We did shoot this around as the sun was setting and we didn't use any off-camera flash. And I really wanted to try a more natural look anyways. So we're gonna go ahead and adjust the exposures, the saturations, along with the hues here in camera raw. So you're gonna go into light, and as you could see, camera raw kind of changed up a bit. And I kind of like some of the changes it has, such as the lens blur. It's just one thing that I'm not the biggest fan of is this version of camera raw is a little bit more buggy. So be mindful of that. Always write down what you've done, so that way, if things ever go haywire, you have it written down on a handy dandy notebook like Blue's Clues, you feel me? But anyways, let me stop jibber jabbering and let's get down to the exposure. Now, I wanna bring this photo up one stop, and always pay attention to your histogram, because your histogram is far more accurate than what your eyes can see. So I already know I want to bring this up a full stop. And I think 95 is going to be a juicy spot. When it comes down to it, I never really like touching the contrast, but I'm going to go ahead and add a smidge here, like 5. And when it comes down to portrait photography, I always like to bring the highlights really, really down. I don't know why, it just brings more detail in the skin when I do that. And I like to bring the shadows far up. So like, I think 13 will do it. And then the next thing I like to do is bring out the whites and then bring in a little bit more contrast by dabbling in some darks. Now going into color, I'm not really liking the temperature. So I'm gonna actually make it a little bit more warm, get back that little sunset feel, and just throw in a little bit magenta when it comes down to the tint. I really don't like touching the tint too much, but in this case, a little bit of magenta would do just fine. And then we're gonna bring up the vibrance way up to like 7. And we're not gonna mess with the saturation. It's saturated enough. Now, the next thing we're gonna do is go into effects and throw in some texture and clarity. Now, I'm gonna bring the texture to like 3 and the clarity to just like 1 because these are super intensive if you bring them all the way up, and it just looks super ugly. So 3 and 1 is the sweet spot for me when it comes down to this photo. And I'm gonna dial in some vignette or however way you wanna call it. Just the word with the V that kind of puts the corners in a darker spot. And then the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and, if I'm gonna do curves, now you may be here, I like to just dabble in the luminance of the curves, not the RGB. And I'm just gonna smack, I'm actually literally just going to tap and cause a small little S curve. Hardly noticeable because I think the curves here, when you're adjusting them, is strong. If I show you the before and then the after, you kind of see it did so much with just that little tap. So the next thing we're gonna do is actually go into the color mixer. Now I like taking the target and pinpointing certain places where I wanna adjust my hues, saturations, and luminances. But in this case, I'm actually gonna just mess with the sliders because I already know off rip what colors exactly I wanna attack. Now, when it comes down to hues, I'm super careful when it comes down to the red, oranges, and yellows because this is where the skin falls. But for the oranges, I'm actually gonna throw off some orange. And that's all I'm gonna do for the skin. Now for the greens, as you can notice here, there's some green there. There's a little bit of yellow here, and his uniform is blue. So we're gonna pay attention to those colors as well. So we're gonna go into the greens and we're going to actually bring it way back to like -18. That way we could see what we're doing here. And it may be a minute part of the picture. It does make a huge difference adjusting that. So we're going to turn it off, on. And I'm kind of liking it there. Now my aquas, now we're gonna look at his suit now to look at our aquas, blues, purples, and possibly magenta. Now for my aquas, I'm actually going to dial it back and then throw in some blues. I know this suit's mainly in the blue section and a little bit in the aquas. Now, since virtue is the main subject, when it comes down to saturation and luminance, I'm just gonna actually attack the oranges here. So I'm gonna actually saturate his skin more, and I'm actually gonna bring the luminance up to like 14 so we can brighten up his skin. And let's do a before and after, what we did to our HSL. And I think it brought the photo out a lot more. So now we're gonna go into the color grading. Now, everyone got that one thing in their color grading process that they're afraid to touch, but I'm learning to be more brave and actually mess around with this color grading. Now, I realize my biggest issue and what's intimidating is actually looking at the color wheel. So what I actually like to do is just specifically click on it so that way I can have the HSL slider to mess with. And I already know off rip in my shadows, I actually want to do the opposite of what you would see in film, which is the orange and teal, and kind of make it the teal and orange, which basically I'm actually going to throw some orange in my shadows, and the orange would fall somewhere around here. And I'm going to slightly add just one saturation. And then we're going to go into the highlights. And we're going to actually go into the blues, teals, whatever color you want to call this, cyan. And we're actually going to go to 194 and add 1 to that too. And if you turn it on, it's a subtle difference. You may not see it on your monitor, but over here, it's looking pretty nice. And since it's at ISO 100, there's no need to denoise it any further. And we're gonna go to geometry. Now, I never really dabbled with lens blur. And as you can see, it's a beta since you see this early access button here. And I'm already at a 1.2 aperture, so it's pretty fast already. So I'm not gonna need no lens blur, but in the future, I would love to use that. And I always like to see what A would do, see if it straightens out the photo. And in this case, it definitely did. And now we're gonna go to calibration and wrap it up here. So I'm actually going to subtract some red hues here. And for the greens, now pay special attention to the greens because the greens kind of is the in-between of the image. So it's always good to pay special attention to the green primaries. And what I'm actually going to do here is put it at -3 and then +2. And then for the blues, I'm actually going to dial away some to -2 and -3. Now, let's press this button and see where we came from to where we're at now. Now, this is a great starting point, in my opinion. We're going to go ahead and press OK. Okay, so now that we got our camera raw dealt with, the next thing we could do is actually go to my actions. And it's going to be available to you for free down in the description below. Make sure you press that like button. And we're going to keep pressing enter until it stops. Now you may get some warnings, just skip through them, keep pressing OK. As you can see, after you press that play action button, nothing happened to the photo because we still got to go in there and do some dabbling ourselves. So the first thing we're going to do is attack the color balance. So we're going to go into our color balance. And as you can see, we got our highlight, midtone, and shadows. Now I'm going to give you guys a little trick. Double click on this empty side here and go to current layer. And as you can see, we got highlight color balance. So I'm going to drag this all the way to here. That way it's only affecting the highlights. And then we're going to hold Option, separate it so we can have a more even spread and just bring that all the way to the end. Press OK. And I'm going to do the same thing with these other two real quick. So I'm going to double click here and eliminate the shadows and eliminate the highlights. Just make sure we're in the midtones and do the exact same thing by holding Option. Then we're going to press OK. And then we're going to do the same thing with our shadows. Drag this all the way to the left. That way we're only attacking the shadows. Holding Option and then dragging this right here and then pressing OK. Now that we got everything properly in order, we're going to go back to our highlight color balance. And originally it starts with the midtones when it comes down to the tones. And we need to move to the highlights because we only want to affect the highlights for this particular layer. So for the highlights, I want to actually dial in some cyan, put in some magenta. And actually, to balance it out, let's put in some blues. And we're going to turn it off, turn it on. And it's looking far more balanced to me. So now for midtones, I know I kind of just want to affect the cyan and the reds because that's where his skin will fall. And I actually want to add some cyan to it. Very subtle. And as for the shadows, we're going to go ahead and change that to shadows. And we're actually going to throw in some red and some blue. Now we're going to turn all three of these off. We're going to turn on the highlights so you could see. It kind of did something to the whites. I'm going to zoom in so you guys could see. So if we turn off the highlights, you could see there's a little orange tinge going on. So turning it on kind of balance it back to a more natural white. And we're going to go ahead and zoom back out. We're going to turn on the midtones. And as you could see, it kind of affected this behind virtue, kind of gave it a more green look. And then we're going to turn on the shadows. It evens out the blacks. And since the 3 of these color balances already did the overall, we're going to go ahead and just get rid of the overall color balance and go to the background color balance. Because what I want to do to the background isn't what I want to do to virtue. So the best way to get a good selection of your subject, from what I've learned, is actually going to the quick selection tool. And then you're going to see this right here where it says select subject. Now, before you do that, actually go ahead and pick cloud, which will give you detailed results. And then click on select subject. And it's going to give you a more cleaner selection. And boom. Now, the next thing we're going to do, which I absolutely love this new taskbar that Photoshop implemented, is go to this fill selection, which is this paint bucket. And then we're going to actually fill that with black. And then we're going to press Command D to get rid of these marching ants. And as you could see over here, it created a mask. Black conceals, white reveals. And as you could see, it's DJ Virtue who's painted in black in this mask, which basically means nothing's going to happen to Virtue and everything's going to happen to the background. And I'm just going to utilize the overall without touching the layer style. And the first thing we're going to want to do is go into midtones. And I already know I want to draw in some green in that midtone, specifically for this. And for my highlights, I'm actually going to go to -2 and go to 5. Bada bing, bada boom, with bam. And then we're going to go to shadows. And we're actually going to dial in some more blue into the shadows. And then we're going to turn it off. And we're going to turn it on. And I think that gives a more natural look for the background in comparison to what we had before, which was a little bit warm. And by this being blue and Virtue kind of still having that warmness to him, kind of separates him from the background. Now we're going to go into the curves, and then it does say adjust RGB, but we're not going to do that. But what we are going to do is press Command J to make a duplicate copy. And then we're going to press Command I to blacken this one and leave this one be. Now, when it comes down to the curves, it's super strong. So I just like to add a smidge at the end and a smidge at the beginning and just leave it like that. And when it comes down to here, now what this is going to do is do some more separation between the subject and the background. And what I like to do is press a point here, and I got to give Eli Infante his flowers because he's the one that taught me this. And I'm going to actually draw a higher up fade in the shadow section. Now, if I press Command I, you're going to see it fades out the whole photo. And that's basically what it's doing. And we're going to press Command I again because we don't want it to do that. And we actually want to draw that fade in the background, but in subtle areas to separate Virtue from it. So we're going to actually press B to go to our brush, and we're going to change the opacity. We're going to change the opacity over to like 75. We're going to bring the flow way down. That way it's not painting deep up in there. And we're just going to actually manually draw around Virtue. I have a Wacom tablet, so it's kind of easy to draw in that fade, and it's not doing anything because I have it in black. So I'm going to make it reveal by pressing X so we can get to a white. And then we're going to draw in and make sure you're on the mask and not here because it's not going to work if you tap here. So make sure you're on the mask and just draw in those fades and areas where, be honest with you, where you feel like it's appropriate. And I know in this case, it's just going to be in this midsection of virtue. All right. Now to the most fun part of it all, which is the selective color. This is where the colors are really going to pop out. So what I'm going to want you to do is go to your selective color. And as you could see down here, we're going to go ahead and drag that mask up. And we're going to hold Option as we click that. And it's going to make a copy onto here. I already know that I'm going to have a separate selective color from the background and virtue. So I'm going to rename this accordingly. I don't need this extra copy, so I'm going to throw this away. This is going to be the overall. As a matter of fact, since it's already named overall, I'm actually going to make that the overall. Delete this mask, create a new one, bring that up, and make this just for the background. So we're going to go into here and we're going to dial in some numbers and get some real sauce into this photo. So when you're using selective color, it's best to pay attention to your color wheels to see what color complements or contradicts one another. So if we're in the reds, if we put in some cyans, we're actually taking away red from the photo. If we take away some cyans, we're actually putting in more red into the photo because cyan is right across from red, just as blue is right across from yellow and green is right across from magenta. If that's a fun fact you never knew, I hope that taught you a thing or two. And if it did, you already know what to do. Press that like button, baby. So let's go into the reds and let's go ahead and actually dial in a little bit more red by going to like -6. And I want some magentas in my red too. So I'm going to put +2 and then put in some yellows. It's always good to put in some yellows. And the reason being is because that's where my skin is. It's going to be in my reds and my yellows. And you don't want it too red where he's looking like a flaming hot Cheeto, or too yellow to the point where he's looking like Big Bird, or too orange to where he's looking like an Oompa Loompa. So skin tones are always the biggest challenge for beginning photographers. And be honest with you, I feel like that's just something you learn over time. Anyways, we got our reds dealt with. Let's go into the yellows. And we're not going to do too much to the yellows. As a matter of fact, I'm actually going to take away some yellow by adding in some cyan and actually putting in to compensate for that lost by adding 2, and then darkening our yellows by adding blacks. And then we're going to turn it off to see what we're doing so far. Turn it on. Now I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see a little bit better. And turn off, turn on. Now Virtue got a little spots on his face. That's something I'm going to take care of later. We're just going to focus on color grading our photos. So we're going to go from yellows, and it's not enough green in here for me to care. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my cyans because I know that's going to dabble in his suit a little bit. And we're going to go ahead and actually just darken it by adding in some blacks. And then blue is where our suit's really sitting in reality. And we're actually going to throw in some more cyan so the suit could look more blue. And we're going to go real heavy here. And we're going to throw in some yellow to dial back that cyan. And we're going to actually go ahead and take away some black so we can actually brighten up the suit a little bit. And I'm feeling comfortable at -22. As for the whites, we're going to skip magenta. We're just going to add some more cyan into the white. And we're actually going to make it brighter by bringing up the blacks. And then neutrals, that's basically where our skin tone falls. We're not going to do too much. We're just going to eh, eh, and eh. And that's really it. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom all the way out, turn it off, turn it on. Super subtle, but I like it. Now we're gonna go to the background selective color, and we're just gonna put in a whole lot of red so we can make these pop out. So I'm actually going to brighten it up. Well, this is actually going to darken it. And then I'm gonna throw in some magenta into there and throw in some yellow. And mind you, if we take away cyan, we're actually adding some red just so we can get those lights popping out a little bit more. So if I turn it on, that's what it looks. Turn it off, that's how it looks. It looks a little muted. So we added more pizzazz when we added that red. That's all I really want to do to the background. Now for the skin tones. Now, as you can see, I already have a black mask here because I only want it affecting the skin tones. Now there's a bunch of ways where you could select the skin tone, but I'm actually going to just draw it in for the sake of this video. So I'm going to take my pen, and if you press the backslash key, you're going to get this red. My only problem with the red is it kind of hurts my eyes a little bit. So I'm just going to assume I know where the skin tone is, and I'm just going to draw it in there. Now, as you can see, our opacity is at 75. Let's throw it up to 86, and let's bring it up to like a good 64, and let's draw it in. All right, now that it's drawn in, you can go ahead and hold Option and click on your mask, and it'll show you where you drew it in. And then we're going to go click right here. We're going to select a specific gradient. Now, I love these gradient skin tones by J. Jugum. And I always want to pick a color closest to his skin. So I like to bring the palette next to him and assume which color looks best with him. So I'm going to assume that this goes best with him. And as you can see, the change and his skin tone, he's a little bit more brighter. If I turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on. Let me go ahead and zoom in so you guys could see a little bit closer. So turning it off, this is what his skin tone looked before. Turning it on, again, you may not see it on your monitor, but it's actually doing a pretty good change. And we're gonna actually go from the jump and see how our photo looked before. So we're gonna hold Option all the way down here and press on background. This is where we actually started, guys, and I think we're making a lot of progress. So we're gonna hold Option again, and we're very close to the end actually. And the last thing, well, not necessarily the last thing, but close to the last thing we're gonna do is the luminosity, which is going to affect the brightness of these specific colors. Now, I already have the luminosity set, so there's no need for you to adjust any of these numbers. So here at the luminance part, I'm going to look at this photo and I can already tell there's some numbers I want to change here. Oh, and before I get to the luminance, let me mind you as well, when I'm in the skin tone gradient map, change it over to soft light whenever you're at the gradient mapping, and do the fill at 15, or else this is going to be overkill. So let's go back to luminosity and let's go back to these numbers. Now I already know I want to bring up the reds because that's his skin. I think 40 is a pretty sweet spot. And then for my yellows, let me dial it back to like 86. There's no greens, there's no cyans really, but there is his suit that's blue. So we're gonna bring that up as well too. And then there's no magentas. So boom, I think this is pretty good. But one last thing I like to always do with my photos is actually create a stamp visible layer, which is Command, Option, Shift, and E. And it's going to create a whole new picture from all the underlying layers below. And what I like to do, which I think kind of adds pizzazz to the photo, is actually use this program called Retouch for Me. And they have a whole bunch of things going on when they utilize AI. They implement it into Photoshop, and it just makes the workload that much quicker, because if you're doing portrait photography, you have to dodge and burn. And dodging and burning, especially when you have a bunch of photos, kind of just kills the joy out of it. And I'm a man of efficiency, which basically means how can I get this done quicker without the loss of quality? And I stand behind these plugins. They do such a great job. So I'm going to go ahead and just AI this dodging and burning to skip the process. And I'm going to go to filter. I'm going to go to retouch for me. And then we're going to do dodge and burn. And then we're going to have this splash page load up. And usually you're going to have your blend mode start actually at 100. But I always realize the sweet spot for me is always between 130 and 135. And if you click this soft layer, it's going to create a soft light layer for you. But as a matter of fact, yeah, let me go ahead and create that. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually press Command J and then go back into that again. That way it'll just do it to that layer that I just created. So click on dodge and burn. All right. Now I'm going to put it at 135, press apply. And then it's going to create this gray looking layer. Now, don't be frightened. Nothing bad happened to your photos, but it's basically telling you what it's dodging and burning. The brighter parts of the gray is where it's dodging, and then the darker parts is where it's burning. And then what you simply need to do is kind of what it says. Change this layer mode into soft light. And then as you could see, it does the dodging and burning for you. If I turn it off and turn it on, you're going to see in his skin the most prominent change. So we're going to turn it off. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of sleep marks, dark marks, and it kind of evens out your skin. Now, I also have the heel portion of this as well too. And if you guys want to see that real quick, let me go ahead and create another stamp visible. Press Command J. We're going to go to retouch for me again in the filter section, and we're going to click on heel. Now I'm going to show you guys what the heel does. And be honest with you, these are the only two that I've actually downloaded from them, because these are actually kind of expensive. So I'm going to press apply, and it creates a new layer. So if you hold option, just click on the eye, you're going to see exactly where it cleaned up all the freckles and imperfections in his face. And if I press option and click on his eye again, you're going to see it actually did a pretty good job eliminating some bumps. I'm going to turn it off so you could see and turn it on. And it basically did the job for you. Just imagine you having to do this for 20 photos, just manually patching up the skin and all of that, in comparison to just one click of a button where it kind of does the job for you. And that's basically it. You guys tell me, what do you think about this photo? Do you think I did a pretty good job, or do you just think it's straight trash? Either way, it's going to be available to you on Instagram for you to leave your comments. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe if you found this video beneficial. And this is it. We just fried some fish. My real name's Kit. That's it. Deuces.